So today I'm going to talk about probably what's the most stressful thing that happens to anybody in their career, and it's that moment when you realise that something terrible could be on the cards and you could be let go, fired, sacked, downsized, right-sized, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just going to go through some things that you should think about. If you get the feeling that this is kind of on the cards, why would I know anything about that? Well, I've been in work now for 45 years. I've been made redundant myself 7 times. So I kind of know what it's like, and I do have some first-hand tips, and we're going to be focusing on the absolute pragmatic, practical things that you should do when you know this is in the air. Do them today. Don't wait till tomorrow, because it could happen tomorrow. So let's just get into this, and I'm just going to list them. Okay, so first thing I'm going to say is there's obviously different ways of being made redundant. If you are going to get absolutely fired for some kind of disciplinary matter, or something has gone badly wrong and you think that that's on the cards, most of these will still apply to you. There are a few extra things to think about. First one is, and this is for everybody, this isn't just for that setting, get a copy of your terms and conditions of your employment. Understand exactly what it is that you're entitled to during this process, and it can range from nothing to, you'd be surprised by how much it is, and you may already know, but it's always worthwhile understanding what that is. And don't think that you will be told, because if companies are really disorganized, they must be. After all, they're letting you go. They must be disorganized. If they really are disorganized, they may not know that they have an obligation to, perhaps, I don't know, provide human resources after the termination date to help you find another position. It has been known. Number 2, and this is a practical thing and it's worth doing. You never know when the axe is going to fall, and you never know if it's going to be you or not. So my advice is, look around you, understand what all of your personal effects are in the office, work out what it is you don't need for the next 2 or 3 weeks, take it home. That way you don't have any debates about whether it's yours or somebody else's or anything like that. The decision has already been made then, and you're in charge. So that's a great position to be in. If something needs to be sent back, then great, but you have the decision to make. Likewise, everybody has their own personal files on their corporate machines these days. Get them off if you can. Either send yourself an email with them, or if it's possible, stick a USB stick in and take the personal files off. We'll come on to anything else in the way of data afterwards. But if you can't actually get them off, you're then stuck in a really difficult position. If this is personal stuff, I thoroughly recommend you immediately delete it, because if things do get unpleasant with your current employer, they will look for evidence that you've been in some way breaking employment policy, and storage of personal files could be an issue. So take them off. If you have to delete them, then I'm afraid it's a decision for you as to whether you want to risk it or not, or whether you think you'll be given time to actually take this stuff off after they notify you. But my view is delete it or get it off anyway. Okay, let's just talk for a minute about other digital assets that you believe are yours, but they may be open to dispute. So we all know about IP, the ownership of it. Most firms these days say that anything invented on their time is theirs, and you need to be very careful about anything that you decide is something which you can remove. However, I'm not saying as a blanket don't do it, but if you do it, be prepared to have to defend this if necessary in court. It's a good position to be in if you've taken it already, but be aware that firms take a very dim view of this, especially if they're in the digital space where these are their core assets. Just be very careful on that. Likewise, if you're a salesperson and you have your contact lists are absolutely vital, but firms know that. Okay, I may be saying things here which you would know anyway, but these things are critically important, and if this has never happened to you before, it may not come easily to mind, especially if you're in a state of shock after it's happened to you. Try and do these things in advance before the axe falls. So the next point is, don't forget your company phone if you've got one. If you have a company phone and you've got lots of contacts on there, then you need to be aware that they're there, and you can take steps to make sure that you've still got access to those names and phone numbers. Be aware that there's an IP issue here though. So widening the remit a little bit now, let's look at the things that you should be doing outside of the immediate first steps. The first thing obviously is, on LinkedIn there are two things you absolutely have to do. The first one is get your LinkedIn profile right up to date. Make sure that it's a real selling asset for you. If the axe doesn't fall, you've wasted nothing, and you might actually find that if this company that you're working for has given you this much anxiety, maybe it's time to look around. However, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is really good. Now, I know that people who've worked for 10 years for firms frequently don't have anything on their LinkedIn profile. Now is the time to change that. So the second thing on LinkedIn is, how are your contacts looking? And I know this is kind of second nature for a lot of people. We live on LinkedIn. We have hundreds and hundreds of contacts. But frequently people who've been in one role for a long time or with one firm for a long time don't bother with it. This is the backdoor method of keeping your contacts in the industry available to you, despite the fact that you may no longer be working for the firm. So now is the point where you add all of the invitation requests in right now, as many people as you can. Doesn't matter whether you like them or not, send those requests. Now is the time to do it before anything happens. So let's now touch on the Armageddon possibility, where things go really bad, or in some respects you're literally being fired from a role. If you believe that you are being scapegoated, or that you have a defence which has not been heard, now is the time to start looking up the services of a good employment lawyer. Now, I've done this, and if you find a good employment lawyer, frequently just being able to quote their name is enough to basically get you what you want with your old firm. It can be as simple as that. And if not, you've got a good source of advice. These people are expensive though. At this stage, see if you can find some recommendations from people. That's a really useful tip. It's literally saved me tens of thousands of pounds in an acrimonious departure from one firm, and I would thoroughly recommend it. Okay, let's widen the remit of this list now, and let's talk about what you should be doing before the axe falls in terms of what you're doing at work. So I've got one or two possible approaches to take, but the first thing to say is make sure that you remain professional at all times. Okay, just because you think you're about to be made redundant doesn't mean you should stop work, because it basically opens the door to some kind of retrospective issue. I would just be professional, keep working, keep doing your job to the best of your ability. Yes, you'll be lacking motivation, but make sure nobody can reproach you afterwards and say that you didn't do your best right up until the end. Next point, and this is a bit of a wide point. If you are invited to a meeting and you don't know what the meeting is about, always take a notepad and a pen. You probably do anyway, but if you don't normally do it, make sure you start now. Because the key thing when you're in a disciplinary or a termination interview or termination notice is being given, you need to be able to write down everything that's stated. And if you feel that there is a looseness to what's going on, make sure that people are aware that you're taking notes. It'll tighten things up, it'll put them on guard. That's fine, because you want absolute clarity in exactly what's being said. And the other thing to say about this whole professional point is, this is actually quite good for your morale. If you're about to be let go, then the fact that you have a good record with the firm that you've worked for, you've done your best for them, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, it cannot have been me personally, it must have been either somebody else who has the wrong impression of me, or the company is in difficulty. But it's good for your own morale if you can say, it was not of my own doing. Okay, this is an important point next. Do not settle old scores if you're being made redundant. Don't use the opportunity to tell your boss exactly what you think of them. Don't lay waste to the department. Don't shout at people as you walk out through the door. It's so tempting, I know. It feels grossly unfair that you have to button your lip, but it's in your own interest to do that. And the reason why? I know multiple instances of people who have been let go. The company then discovers that it can't do critical aspects of what it's supposed to on a day-to-day basis because it didn't recognise that you were critical to actually performing that. And then they come back to you. If you have burned your bridges on the way out of the door, it will be much harder for them to do that, and they will do almost anything to avoid it, frankly, because you'll have poisoned the working relationship. Likewise, even if you dislike people and you think, well, I've got nothing left to lose now, I might as well tell them what I think of them, don't do it. 5 years down the line, when you discover there's a dream role in a competitor, you'll be mortified if you discover that the person who you slagged off is actually in charge of the recruiting for that. It does happen, especially in markets where it's a fairly incestuous relationship or the market's quite small. You need to make sure that you keep the possibilities as wide as possible. Okay, and I just wanted to mention one underlying point about all this. This is about you looking after yourself. The job market these days is much more fluid. A job for life is now long gone in most cases. But the legacy is that people frequently invoke some kind of, this company is like a family vibe, or they expect you to go above and beyond in all things to try and make sure that they bind you in as tightly as possible, and they will leverage that as even as you go out of the door having been let go. You're now in charge of your own one-person business. You're no longer part of the family. It's time to look after yourself, and these are the first steps that will enable you to do that. And the last thing to say is, like I said at the beginning, this has happened to me 7 times. I was quite surprised when I totted it up. It's happened to me in easy situations where somebody said, look, this just isn't working out, find something over the next 6 months, will you, to the can't go back to your desk scenario, to me taking legal action against the firm. I've had all of those, and the key thing to remember is this is not about you. This is about either somebody else's relationship with you, or it's about a firm which is going under or has to make big savings. Don't take it personally. The strongest thing you've got going for you is your self-belief and your confidence. There is no bigger confidence shaker than being made redundant or fired or let go, whatever. I know it's terrible, but the thing I'm going to say to you is, having been made redundant 7 times, I've been very successful subsequently and had 20 good years running my own business as an option. It's not the end of the world. Opportunities will open out, and we'll talk about the way to get those opportunities maybe in an upcoming video. This is all about the immediate time just before, during and after you're disappearing from sight in your current company. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. This is a bad time. It's a crappy time. Try not to worry as much as you think you might do. I know that's really easy to say. I do know that's really easy to say. And I know you will worry about it. It could actually be the greatest thing that ever happens to you. Be ready to take the bull by the horns as you walk out the door. And good luck.